Ready, set, go!
Hello, welcome. Today we'll be talking about organizational standards. Now, we've recently been putting out qualifications for organizations like the 75th Ranger Regiment, the U.S. Air Marshals, and there'll be a couple more to follow. Why have we chosen to go down this path as far as making videos and demonstrating these qualifications of certain organizations? It is my personal belief that it is significantly easier to learn to do some things if you see what people have already done. But specifically, we're looking at organizations. And the reason why I've selected organizations as opposed to individual people is organizations can outlast an individual for a very, very long time. Organizations are made up of individuals, and good organizations are able to take the successes of those individuals and make it history or standard operating procedure for that organization. The lessons learned by the individuals become enshrined in the culture of the organization, and so the organizational culture is developed. But not all organizations are created the same, and not all people in those organizations are skilled or good at what they do. If you've ever worked in a government organization such as the military or law enforcement, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. If you've ever had to interact with any of these agencies to get your job, duties, or whatever business you have done, you'll notice that there's a great disparity between how some agencies perform and others. You've likely been in or worked with an organization that feels and performs like it's been around for over 250 years. And some organizations feel like they've been around since yesterday. And even when tomorrow comes, it feels like they've always started doing this job yesterday. They never develop, they never learn, they never get any of those operating procedures down pat, and there's just no progression. And that's why I want to highlight some successful organizations that have a long history of successful marksmanship programs. They have progression. They've learned, they've suffered, they've made mistakes, and they've gotten better. So I want to present those successful aspects of each organization, and specifically the knowledge they have by what requirements they have for their brand new people, their absolute most junior people that come into their organization. For you, this would have several benefits. Number one is, what is most important to this organization when they get brand new people? What are the skills? What is the knowledge? What is the culture? What are the expectations? How fast do they want them to get there from A to B, from novice to expert? And the 75th Ranger Regiment is a great example of that. As you guys know, we posted several of their qualifications, and I'm so ecstatic to see some of you saying that they are so easy, these part-times are ridiculous, which is fantastic. I'm glad that there is such a congregation of fantastic shooters that you could all pass basic private qualifications if you had to be in that organization. Many of the guys in the comments that have been in Ranger Regiment have pointed out that these are basic private qualifications. They are just an assessment so you could do more high-risk training such as shootouts, trench assaults, airfield seizures, and so forth. If you're looking to join this organization, then you already have some of the key skills that they're going to demand of you, and so you know how to prepare so you show up and perform. But say you're not looking to join this organization. What value does it have to you? If you're a civilian shooter and you have no interest in joining this organization, this gives you some benchmarks to assess yourself up against, whether you're a seasoned or novice shooter. And in comparison to other organizations in the Army, like the conventional Army, these standards would be very difficult for most basic soldiers to pass, and I mean both combat arms, combat support, and support. Law enforcement would be a similar story. Most law enforcement agencies do not commit a lot of time to training rifle. They do commit time to training pistol, however, I'm sure you've seen body-worn camera footage that would suggest that there isn't sufficient training going around. If you don't believe me, which I don't think you should go and look at things yourself, look at things from your own perspective. What do you see? What are trends that emerge? And decide for yourself. And if you go through that process, I believe you'll see that these qualifications for the 75th Ranger Regiment are quite advanced for what is going on around the world with other organizations. The second benefit is the specific metrics that these qualifications give you. Once we start talking about metrics and qualifications, we have times, accuracy, points, scores, things like that that can be quantifiable. You can write it down on a piece of paper, measure it Monday and measure it Friday, and see who did better at what. Now, once we start comparing performances from one person to another, we usually call that competition. Competition reveals who has more skill on that specific day. And this is especially critical for organizations because in organizations there's usually a hierarchy, leadership, some kind of position. If your organization has intelligent leadership, they will likely assess people based on their metrics, their performance. That'll at least be a factor in deciding who should take charge or who should work in a specialized program. This is especially important for organizations, but at the individual level, no one wants to work for someone that's completely incompetent or low skill or can't manage high performance individuals. That's just never a good formula and no one wants to be in that position. When this does happen, you see things like high turnover rate. People leave. People go to different organizations. They don't want to be in an organization that cannot manage people well, and so that's why metrics are important. We can now definitively say, hey, a person should be able to draw and fire a shot out of the holster at something like 1.5 seconds. That should be an organizational standard. We should have people able to do a ready up with a rifle and fire 2 rounds in under 3 seconds in a variety of positions and distances. The third and final benefit is the foundational skills that going through this qualification process will develop for you. If you're a novice shooter, you'll likely need to do some sort of train up to meet these standards and then pass them. Once you start passing these standards regularly and then with ease, this will be a springboard that'll let you go to more advanced levels of training, and at that point you'll have the foundational knowledge and skills to assess what you need for yourself. What are your deficiencies? What do you foresee yourself doing in the future? And if you're a seasoned shooter or maintain some kind of leadership position, this will be a great way for you to develop your peers and subordinates alike. But there's a particular pitfall I want to warn you, and again, you can decide if this applies to you or not. There is this ideology that simply shooting qualifications will get you proficient, and I simply believe that that is not true. You should use qualifications as a foundational base for higher level skills, much like successful organizations do. But once you meet those standards, you shouldn't just sit there and run the same standards over again. There needs to be some kind of competition or assessment. And I don't mean that you need to start shooting competition. There's various other ways to assess things, but there needs to be a pressure testing process. Something to see if these skills are valid in your context or your environment. Do they actually give you any kind of benefit? Because even if you're the slightest bit committed to passing the qual and developing your skills, there's going to be some point where you end up standing there like Aaron Cowan from Sage Dynamics with a Glock 19 with no sights, shooting the FBI qual, wondering what the hell you're going to do with all the time.
Hell am I supposed to do with all this extra time? So, third time shooting the FBI qualification course, and I shot 100% on a gun with no sights.
And fortunately for shooting or marksmanship skills, competition shooting is one of those things that will give you those assessments. Shooters who end up becoming fixated on qualifications start to develop some bad habits. People become stagnant and they don't want to push themselves, and they become very comfortable with the time standards that they've been asked to shoot for quite a while now. Qualifications generally function like this. You have a certain amount of time to conduct a process and achieve hits on a target. Qualifications rarely ask you to do something as fast as you physically can, repeatedly. And so you have people going as slow as they physically can. If they have 1 minute to conduct a task, they'll use almost all of that minute to conduct the task. And I believe that starts to develop a crutch that people start to rely on where it becomes a school versus real life type of scenario. People become comfortable with those time standards that they've learned in school or some kind of very clean environment, and they don't want to push themselves or go into these environments where you don't necessarily follow the rules to a T. There's some creativity, there's some performance variability. And that essentially sets the foundational standards or explanation of a lot of the FUD culture and marksmanship. A lot of this marksmanship culture is very slow, methodical. It uses all the time it's given. It doesn't like to take a lot of risk. It likes to play within the rules. There's not a lot of speed. Speed generally results in mistakes from their perspective, not because you'll guaranteed to make mistakes if you go fast. But these concepts aren't necessarily irrational. They are grounded in a reason. The focus on accuracy is what keeps you out of court and being sued for various marksmanship blunders. Accuracy is important for mitigating litigation or liability in all scenarios. But my opinion is that there is a point where accuracy being delivered so slowly makes it become irrelevant. Accuracy with an unlimited time limit is a good baseline standard. That is kind of the expectation. But accuracy delivered with speed is a higher level of performance. That should be the goal, the objective, which you should strive to. For the last 11 minutes or so, you've been watching a B-class USPSA shooter competing in carry optics with an agency-issued Glock 47 of the Gen 5 variety. You've also likely seen footage of a local carbine match with a personally owned rifle. In June, this will mark my 1-year anniversary of formally competing in competition matches for marksmanship or some kind of shooting event. Why is this relevant? I appreciate you for asking. When compared to a professional organization such as a law enforcement agency, less than 1% of law enforcement officers compete or do any kind of outside training other than what is required by their organization. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You could simply watch what happens in the news or any of the BWC footage. Now, it's not all bad, but there are certainly some egregious acts that should not be allowed. I would say a B-class shooter is in the top 10 percentile of all law enforcement. When compared to the Army as a whole, I would say the fact that you showed up with a gun that has its optic on, has power, and has the equipment for it and is zeroed would already be an above average performance. Which is somewhat concerning because a B-class shooter is only in the 65th to 75th percentile of all shooters in USPSA in their division. So by simply showing up, you've already beat quite a few people. And then if you commit the range practice and the dry fire and all the technical skills to be a bit more competitive in competition matches, then your top end performance and your bottom end performance will both increase. So regardless whether you work for a government agency or you're on your own and just trying to develop survival skills, basing yourself off of quals is only going to get you so far. And if you're a leader in an organization, then you owe it to your peers, subordinates, and to demonstrate to your supervisors that you deserve higher levels of responsibility, or you should have a say on what happens in the organization. Because at the end of the day, if not you, then who is best suited to optimize and run your life? So try some of the quals out, whether it's the ones we posted or some other ones. Go out there and shoot a match, whether it's USPSA, PCSL, or just a steel match, NRL, or any of the other matches that are out there. Because it should be just as important to you as fitness, finances, nutrition, anything like that. Because that keeps you not dependent on someone else.